surgical hospital idea, the concept, and the ability to preserve blood long enough to deliver it to the front lines. He was the guy who did that and literally saved millions of lives. But as I researched, or as I read and wrote more about him, I began to understand that the iconic Bethune is really just one dimensional, and I became more and more intrigued and determined to find like the other two dimensions of the Bethune character. Historians know, the where and the how and the when of the story, right? But I think the novelist's job, among many other jobs, is to get at the why, the motivation of a character, and what motivates a great man like Bethune, right? And so I came up with the character who's in my Bethune book, and he's very complicated. He's not one dimensional at all, and I think the temptation is to present a character. Certainly in China, I was just in China 2 weeks ago, because the book was published in Chinese, the last one. And I think there's a bit of resistance in publishing that book, the Norman Bethune book, because there he is an icon still. It's sort of like an Abraham Lincoln, warts and all, kind of portrait of Bethune, because there he's still a purely noble figure.
I'd like to talk about your relationship with your characters. And Miko in the Ash Garden says, in memory, there are simply shapes that appear before the eyes of who you are and who you might have been, as incomplete and changeable as the times. Henry James said his characters used to kind of appear to him as shadows, and they'd wave and he'd say hello, and that was the beginning of the relationship. Is there a sort of a typical development of character for you? Do you kind of know them right away, or do you get to know them slowly?
Oh gosh, no, right away, no, not at all. For the writer and for the reader, character is revealed as a result of that character's contact with crisis and conflict, right? We don't know our friends or our neighbors at all in times of comfort and convenience. It's in times of crisis and conflict. I'm paraphrasing Martin Luther King. When true character is revealed, right? When things are going well, it's kind of like, it's just everything is hunky dory, but you can only really truly understand who your characters are when you involve them in a series of crises, right? It's like, we don't write books in which your protagonist experiences no troubles, right? The heart of fiction is crisis, is conflict, right? Things have to go wrong because it's the dynamic of the change of something different happening, some complication in the story, in the life of the protagonist, that gets the story moving, and that helps the writer and the reader dig down into the character and see who they actually are. How do they react to these set of challenging circumstances? And so, to answer your question, it's a very, very slow process of digging down and developing characters by throwing everything but the kitchen sink at them in order to see how they react to these series of complications.
You have a preface to the Ash Garden from Goethe, which says, the imagination journeys longest when the body is tense with fear, when someone unseen lies in wait, which also echoes another preface in which you say, there is no path on into the unknown. What's the deal with you and uncertainty?
Yeah, well, I'm always surprised when I hear people on TV, like politicians, or espousing their position. It's a mystery to me how people can declare themselves so with such certainty on any issue. I don't know, maybe it's a coward's sort of version of Switzerland, like I'm, neutrality all around. But I'm never certain about things, like in terms of, like the use of the bomb, for example. I don't know. You talk to a victim of the bomb, and well, she'll have her position, and then you talk to an Anton Boll character, and he'll have his position, and I'm all ears when I'm talking with when I'm listening to one side, but then just as compelling, right? So I think uncertainty is perhaps our most generous interpretation of the world, because I don't know, absolutes scare me. Absolutes are they invite dogmatism, I think, more than.
Uncertainty is associated with waiting, and when you're waiting for something to happen, and that's your preoccupation with history, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not talking about passivity here. I'm not talking about lying in bed all day.
Yeah, that's too bad, because I've done that, and it's okay.
Yeah, I think history. I don't know. I'm out of my depth here, but key figures in history are usually those ones who are dogmatic and absolutely convinced of their own moral truths, and history is usually powered and moved forward by the greatest criminals of our time. So I don't know. It's tough for me to say. I don't. I kind of just observe characters and try to put them into interesting stories, and the stories that are the settings and the times, subject matter that attracts me very often involve morally, ethically complicated times that I'm more comfortable observing and thinking about, but not comfortable declaring on, because I don't know. I certainly wouldn't try to advise the reader. Was that your word?
Yeah.
Earlier, I wouldn't even advise myself, because it's always too slippery for me.
You did make the declaration in Communist Daughter that is our greatest resource, eternal hope. Is that perhaps a link between Communist Daughter and your following book in 2013, Going Home Again? The idea of hope?
Yeah, in a way. There's, Charlie Belrose, the narrator and protagonist of Going Home Again, he leads with optimism. He's like all of my characters, he's beset by challenges and difficulties, and his life is upside down. But he, like that last line you read from Olympia, he was here where he belonged, or I was here where I belonged with my people, and so on. That's a note of optimism. I don't generally write, fuzzy happy end, ever fuzzy happy end, but I'm not interested in characters who are drowning in their own, cynicism or negativity. And Charlie Belrose is an example of a character who's got a lot of serious challenges in his life, but he refuses to give in. He refuses to lie down, and so I see that as a great sort of moral heroism.
A reviewer said about Going Home Again that it is a look at what can be lost and what regained, a true testament to the enduring passions of being alive. What do you think humanity has lost since the atom bomb first put the mantle of death onto the planet in 1945, and what do we need to regain?
Well, I guess, that sense of innocence was wiped away as a result of the First World War. World War II was just a reprieve. Was the second act, really. So I don't think maybe it was a confirmation of what was lost at the end of global innocence, right? The ability to wipe out the planet, that's kind of a relatively new concept, right? As terrifying as it was, and as it, I suppose, continues to be, it's not the biggest threat, is it? I mean, they did just fine killing people in World War I. Carpet bombing Tokyo in 1944 and 45.
You've moved on, though, in Going Home Again. You've moved to that sort of historic sweep of war, and you've gone to the passions of one man. Was that a deliberate change in territory?
It was deliberate, yeah. I wanted to see if I could do it, really. It was, I think all books for me, to a degree, are an intellectual challenge, intellectual and artistic, of course. But I wanted to write a novel about a very recognizable man. The two previous ones were about exceptional men, right? And this one is about an ordinary and very knowable man, a very intelligent man, but he is an ordinary man. And I was attracted to the idea of going in close.
There's a conversational style in the book that contributes to a feeling of intimacy. I'm going to ask you again. I know we've talked about your 50th birthday, but is this the book of a man approaching 50, sort of looking back perhaps and kind of thinking, here I am at the midway point and what's going on?
Oh yeah, sure, yeah. He's at that age. He's not quite. He's in his mid-40s, I guess.
Yeah.
He's lived enough of his life to reflect now on triumphs and failures in a way that a 30-year-old isn't really equipped or ready for, right? I mean, you're still at the age of 30 consumed by the sense of your own powers and gifts and optimism and so on, and not really, I don't think many of us have met those limitations that become more and more apparent as we age, right? And he's at the age now where the limitations become very real. Limitations in terms of the end of love, difficult family situations regarding his daughter, and also with a deep past that he's kind of becoming reacquainted with. When I was a younger guy, my first book came out when I was 33, I guess it was, and I wrote it, started writing. I guess the first story I wrote that ended up in that book I wrote when I was 25 or 26 or something. An adult, but with limited experience in terms of, ways of the heart and all that sort of jazz, right? So by the age of, 48 or 50, I think we've all lived those challenges, those sort of those heartaches and so on, that can start to be recounted at that age, right?
Charlie Belrose has very uncertain relationships with his children. Have you drawn upon your experiences with your own children?
Yeah, Charlie has one daughter. I, as a father, I feel so. I think most parents feel their worlds have sort of grown exponentially, right, when we have children, in a really positive way, where everything is more important, and Charlie's has that same idea, that same appreciation, the way the world has expanded with the birth of his daughter, and her growing up and so on. But yeah, I mean, whatever sort of experiences that we live through as writers, we apply to our own life when it works from our own life when it works in the writing, right? So that extra, if there's any wisdom, you get after having raised kids or whatever it is, you put whatever you can in your books if there's a place for it, right? And so there are certain autobiographical notes in the novel, and in a way that's not surprising at all, right? I mean, that's what we do. In the two middle books, there's, like I said, there's not very much of it at all, other than obsessions and concerns and ideas. But in terms of representations of the life that I live, none of that in those books. In this latest book, for sure, there's a dad returning from a country that I know very well in Europe, coming back after many, many years, and reacquainting himself with a city and and family relations and friendships that are changing, right, in a kind of troubling way. So I've been in that situation for sure.
What is on your desk right now? Are you willing to talk?
Other than like coffee cups
Coffee
and stuff
cups
like that.
and
Yeah.
and diapers maybe. I don't
Yeah.
know.
No, my kids aren't.
They're a bit older.
They're older than that. Well, yeah. No, I have a book cooking right now, and who knows? 2 years from now, it might be ready.
Or 5 years from now.
It's hard to say. We have writers in the room. We know how long it takes
Is it getting easier or harder or staying the same?
to write them.
Yes, to write them.
Um, it's I think, well, it's always really really hard. It's always really hard. I don't think it's getting harder for me. It's always like extremely difficult. So it's not becoming impossible, but it's always really really tough. But I've been doing it for a while now, and I've been talking about it professionally and teaching and so on. So that kind of helps me clarify my own process a little bit. The hard part for me is coming up with the right idea, right? I have lots of ideas all the time, but not the right idea all the time, right? And there's usually about 5 years between books, and 2.5 of those years is me just like working on ideas and getting rid of the idea and trying to